Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to take a brief call on part two, which is in particular the new return of electoral donations that is Schedule 2. And I just want to reflect on a couple of elements of this new return form. And as with the rest of the bill, the Labor Party certainly supports the changes that are being made here. In particular, obviously, this reinforces the fact that it's any donations that exceed $1,500 that now have to be declared, and that is obviously a useful and important change. The donation form then goes on to talk about what has to be said about the donor who is making that donation of a greater value than $1,500. And the things that need to be written down are the name of the donor, the address of the donor, the amount of the donation, or in the case of aggregated donations, the total amount, and the date the donation was received, or in the case of the aggregated donations, the date that each donation was received. And as I discussed in my contribution on part one of this bill, it's useful to put these new clauses alongside the practice that has come up in the past and see why such change is needed. And let's take the example of the donation from Sky City in 2010 to John Banks's mayoral campaign. How would Mr Banks go about filling out this form? The name of the donor. Well, John Banks knew the name of the donor, Sky City Limited, because he went to a meeting at Sky City where he met the chief executive of Sky City, and that person handed him an envelope with Sky City's logo on the outside with a cheque for $15,000 from a Sky City bank account. So I think we can tick off the first of the requirements under the new Part A, the name of the donor, Sky City. The address of the donor is the second requirement. We can make an assumption that Mr Banks would have known where he was. Now that is a big assumption because he does have some issues that's right, remembering exactly where he was. Yeah, he didn't go there in a helicopter, Mr O'Rourke.
Point of order. Honourable Tauhen Ray.
Mr Chair, I'm just wondering where, if I could get a steer from you, currently before the courts is the Honourable John Banks and so on and so forth over this matter. So I'm just wondering whether we aren't covered by the sub judice blah, 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 blah.
That's a legal term.
Well, yeah, I'll hear Grant Robertson.
Mr Chair, this matter arose yesterday as well during committee stage debate, I think it was, and it was clarified. I was just looking for the Speaker's ruling. It was a ruling from Speaker Terrace, and it made clear that reference can still be made to the matters that are concerned, but not any judgment on them.
The point of order is a valid one, and that we need to be very careful about what we do. It's my understanding that there's certainly a private prosecution taking place, and subject matter pertaining to that is off limits, anything to do. There's a police complaint, I think, that the member was referring to as well, which is at this stage has not moved to a court proceeding. But the member's point is well made, and we need to be very conscious that we don't transgress into areas that are sub judice. So I'll continue to monitor the member.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. So as I said, we were looking at a practical example here of Part A, the new Part A that is in Schedule 2. So we have the name of the donor established, that's Sky City Limited. Could Mr Banks have reasonably known where he was? Well, as we've said, he does have some issues with that, but it's a very large tower in the middle of Auckland. I reckon he would have got there. So he could have fulfilled the second criteria, the address of the donor. The amount of the donation. Now, there's no doubt here whatsoever. Sky City, in their statement in the police report, are very clear. They gave both mayoral campaigns, that of Len Brown and that of John Banks, $15,000. So there was no confusion there about the amount of money was on the cheque. They communicated that. The treasurer of Mr Banks, of Team Banksy, was able to write back a receipt to Sky City for the amount of $15,000. So Mr Banks will be able to fulfil criteria 3, the amount of the donation. The date the donation was received. Now this is an interesting one, Mr Chair, because the donation was clearly received on a particular date. Could Mr Banks reasonably be expected to remember what date that was? I'm going to cut him some slack here because we've seen some fading in his memory over time and may not have known what day it was. However, the people at Sky City certainly did, and when they requested that receipt, they no doubt would have communicated to Mr Banks the fact that he had received this donation. So there we are, Mr Chair, in those 4 criteria for donations that exceed $1,500, we can now see that John Banks should have been able to fill out a form that said, yes, I got $15,000, and he failed to do that. And what is not at issue in any current proceedings is the question of whether or not the police found that Mr Banks had signed a false return. They actually said in their report, Mr Banks did do that. The difficulty that they had was that the time had elapsed before they were allowed to, when they were allowed to mount a prosecution. So there is actually no doubt about that. And this form change is a good thing, but it just highlights the fact that if someone like Mr Banks wanted to come along and wrought the local Electoral Act, which is exactly what he did, that was open to him. These law changes will thankfully mean that people like Mr Banks can't get away with that anymore.
The question is that Part 2 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. We move to Schedule 1, and the question is that the Minister's amendment set out on SOP 198 be agreed to. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that Schedule 1 as amended stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. Schedule 2. The question is that Schedule 2 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. We move to clauses 1 and 2. The question is that clause 1 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. The question is that clause 2 stand part. Those of that opinion will say aye. Contrary, no. The ayes have it. I will report this bill with amendment. You got some words? I'll make them up.
Members, the House is resumed. Mr Chairman.
Mr Speaker, the House and Committee has considered the local electoral amendment bill number 2 bill and reports it with amendment. Mr Speaker, I move that the report be adopted.
The question is that the report be adopted. Those of that opinion will say aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The bill is set down for third reading next sitting day. The House stands adjourned until 2 p.m. today.